welcome to Daily Debrief brought to you by People's Dispatch. I'm Pragya. 3 people have died in a fresh Pakistani Taliban suicide strike in Quetta. Today we look at why violence is escalating in Pakistan's western region. We also discuss Singapore's repeal of a law that criminalized sex between men. How far has Singapore gone to acknowledge and accept sexual diversity and choice? And last, we have an update from Colombia on the startling health impact on women of a widely used herbicide. The Pakistani Taliban called off a ceasefire with the government of Pakistan. The ceasefire was signed in June. Since then, there has been a spiral of attacks, especially in the western regions of the country, as the military tries to suppress the armed group Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan. The civilian government has also renewed efforts for better ties with the Taliban government in Afghanistan. Abdul from People's Dispatch is with us in the studio to discuss this. Abdul, can you tell us what the situation has been like since the ceasefire and after it was called off in Pakistan?
Well, apart from the attack in Quetta, there were also attacks few days before Taliban called off the ceasefire on November 16. Taliban had claimed responsibility of attacking a police convoy in which some policemen were killed. Apart from that, there are also small scale attacks in different parts of the border region between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and particularly in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. So overall situation in Pakistan at this moment is very volatile, and that has prompted to some response from the Pakistani government. Pakistan foreign minister is in Afghanistan talking with the Taliban government there, despite the fact that Pakistan does not officially recognize the government in Afghanistan, since Taliban is considered to have influence over the Pakistani Taliban. There is an attempt made to kind of restart the negotiations. So overall, the situation is quite volatile, particularly in the context that there is a change in guard in the Pakistan military, and there is uncertainty about the policies adopted by the Pakistani government vis-a-vis the terrorist groups at this moment. So because of overall situation, political as well as the claims made by the Pakistani Taliban, in fact, they claimed that they are they are violating, or they are basically breaking off the ceasefire agreement, primarily because it is the security forces of Pakistan who attacked them first. So those allegation and counter allegations are going on, and because of that, the violence is escalating, and it is expected to escalate further.
Abdul, there's some reports which say that most of this violence is in the western regions of Pakistan. Can you just sort of give us a lowdown of what is happening in that region?
Well, the details are very less. When you see the Pakistan media, that is primarily talking about attacks, the main attacks, which basically leads to some large-scale destruction. Otherwise, on the daily basis, in some reports, there are hundreds of attacks carried out by Taliban in last few months itself, despite the fact that there was officially a ceasefire agreement. But the attacks continued, and of course the Pakistani army and the Pakistani security forces also carried out counterattacks. So both attacks and counterattacks are going on, and going on in a large number, in particularly the border regions and in the province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa.
But Abdul, what are the reasons for this region to be so filled with conflict?
Well, the Pakistani Taliban has primarily because of the new government which has come in Afghanistan, has got some ideological boost up, and that has led to a strengthening of its demand vis-a-vis the Pakistani government. At the same time, we also know that there is a shift in government in Pakistan, the new government, and then there are internal political disagreements between the ruling elites in Pakistan. So that also kind of has created a fragile ground in which the Pakistani Taliban is demanding the release of all its cadres who have been arrested by the governments and the military in last few years. It is also demanding, of course, that their version of Islamic regime is established in that region. But the primary demand remains the undoing of basically affiliating the tribal regions with the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa.
Okay.
That they want to be undone, which is, of course, the Pakistani government is not ready to do, despite the fact that there are popular resistance to violence in Pakistan. There were demonstrations held in the last few months by the people in KP and in other provinces in Pakistan against the continuing violence by the Taliban forces. But despite the fact that government has not been able to address the situation in any manner, and in particular because of the nature of the demand put forward by the Taliban, that they are not willing to undo the clubbing of the tribal regions of Waziristan with the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province.
All right, Abdul, thanks a lot for that update. A colonial-era law that banned sex between men has been withdrawn in Singapore. The repeal is being seen as a response to social changes and higher acceptance of sexual diversity. But a constitutional amendment to permanently protect marriage as an institution that is only possible between a man and a woman has also cleared Parliament. Anish from People's Dispatch joins us with the details of both developments and how they happen to come about. Anish, thanks for joining us. Anish, an interesting development in Singapore. Can you just give us a context how this came about?
Yes, so it is definitely an outcome of years, maybe even decades of social activism, calling for not only decriminalization, but an expanded set of rights for sexual minorities in Singapore. Now, this has been going on for a very, very long time. And that in part, like there have been incremental changes over time, like for instance, convictions or even prosecution under the Section 377A has completely just vanished over the past decade or so. Pretty much nobody gets arrested or prosecuted for those sections because of, again, probably because of privacy laws, but also because of the fact that a very clearly globalized younger population has come up who do not view such kind of oppression of sexual minorities very favorably, and that has definitely affected how policies were made. But also, if you think about it, this is pretty much a sort of an appeasement to this very globalized section of the Singaporean population, in the sense that it only decriminalizes sexual activity between consenting adults. But it does almost, but on the other hand, they're trying to prevent any attempt to actually, expand any kind of rights for the sexual minorities, in the sense that they cannot claim to be a family, they cannot have a claim to be a married couple. And obviously with that, inheritance rights or, adoption rights, all of these factors, or even reproductive rights are pretty much kept away from them permanently. So this is sort of like a balancing act that they've tried to do in this, with yesterday's marathon run of constitutional amendments.
Yeah, Anish. Anish, so also they've protected the definition of marriage as it stands. Can you talk about why this was thought to be necessary?
Well, if you look at Minister Shanmugam's own statement in the parliament, he actually stated that this constitutional amendment is an attempt to prevent any sort of quote-unquote creative arguments against the definition of marriage which is that of between man and a woman. So this is an attempt to protect this heterosexual definition of marriage, and also to protect, and then obviously there were others who tried to argue that this is an attempt to protect religious rights of solemnizers, marriage solemnizers, which are usually religious clergy or people of any kind of religious authority. And so obviously it is an attempt to protect their right to not solemnize same-sex marriage or any kind of marriage that is not between a man and a woman. And so this is also primarily because there are obviously cases ongoing in the courts. There were already cases ongoing in the courts against Section 377A and various kinds of definition, not just of marriage, but also of personal liberty, privacy, a person's, bodily autonomy. All of these factors were derived to argue against the criminalization of certain sexual activities based on the very fundamental rights enshrined in the Constitution. And so they just do not want the fundamental rights to stand in the way of the heterosexual definition of marriage, which is something that they have explicitly stated, which is also part of the amendment, where they actually make it a point to say that the fundamental rights sections will not be used against the definition of marriage under any circumstance.
So Anish, in a sense, does the freezing of marriage as it stands take away from the decriminalization?
It definitely does, because in overall, if you look at it, it is just a regression in the sense that obviously decriminalization is a good step forward, but they are taking several steps backwards when they're trying to freeze not just the definition of marriage. We also have a legal amendment being done to prevent people from hiding their assigned sex on their documentation. So this is like on an overall perspective. This is pretty much freezing any avenue for sexual minorities to claim a whole aspect of their rights that are that are something that they're entitled to, but that will not be now afforded to in Singaporean courts. And that is pretty much what has happened yesterday, despite the jubilatory tone that the ruling party was trying to push with the decriminalization.
Right, Anish, thanks for joining us with that update. For decades, Colombia's government has tried to control the illicit production of coca, which is used to manufacture the drug cocaine. But the herbicide sprayed to control coca plantations has had a devastating effect on the health of women, especially their reproductive health. What makes coca hard to control? How much is known about the health impact of glyphosate? And what is Colombia doing about this problem? We spoke to Anna from People's Health Movement about the challenges. So, Anna, good to have you back on Debrief. Anna, glyphosate, now why is it so widely used and why is it so hard to control in Colombia?
Well, glyphosate is a herbicide, and so it's been in use since the 1970s. It was developed by Monsanto, actually, and it was developed to control and basically to protect agricultural crops. Now, in Colombia, it's being used in a different way, and it has been used for years to affect coca farms. So it has been dropped from the air on coca plantations because it was perceived to be as a part of the war on drugs. But then again, this has had very serious consequences on the environment and on the livelihoods of people, because when you drop it from the air, it's impossible to control where it falls. So it doesn't only affect the coca plantations, but it also affects anything that grows beside those plantations. And then, of course, it also affects people because when dropped on people, it has been proved that it has serious health consequences. And so, what recent reports from both human rights organizations and, in particular, women's rights organizations have been is that this usage of the herbicide, which was not controlled enough has meant that first, that it hasn't actually managed to do what it was supposed to do. So the starting point was that if the coca plantations were destroyed in this way, then people would become less involved in this sort of farming, and they would rely on other things. This, of course, has not happened. So if you look at how numbers have changed over time, there hasn't been a significant drop in number of people involved in this sort of farming since the beginning of the use of glyphosate until today. But on the other hand, so it has limited the people's ability to engage in other sorts of farming. So it has impacted their health on another way, and it has essentially not been complemented by any other measure that would enable people to look for other sorts of livelihoods. So it's essentially something that completely missed the mark, and in addition to that, it has undermined health.
What are the effects exactly on the health of the people who get affected by glyphosate?
So as I mentioned, the most recent reports are looking particularly at women's health, and that's because the Center for Reproductive Rights in Colombia has worked with a university in Cali, and they have looked at the numbers of miscarriages and effects on pregnant women that have been caused by the use of glyphosate. So a recent report in Quartz only quotes two examples. Well, two women essentially, who one of whom has lost her life because she was exposed to glyphosate while she was pregnant, and so she first lost her child, and then she died 6 months after that. And of course, these are not the only examples, the only cases that we have seen. There have been many more, and the Center for Reproductive Rights has called for the Colombian government to recognize this as a serious issue and to recognize that it has been a consequence of something that was done systematically by the then government. And so, in addition, of course, to affecting the health of women, this herbicide has been proven to be cancerogenic. So, it's not only something that will affect this generation of people, it's also something that's very likely to impact the lives of the generations to come. So, essentially, what would be the first steps is, of course, to go back to the plants which have already been developed to limit the use of glyphosate, especially in this way, dropping it from the air uncontrolled, without control, and then figuring out a way to actually support the people who have already been exposed and who are suffering the consequences of it.
Right, Anna. Thanks a lot for joining us with that update.
Thanks.
And that is all we have for today. Thank you for watching Daily Debrief. Do come back to us tomorrow. And for more stories like these, visit our website, peoplesdispatch.org, and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.